So what is most important to you in your life? Where you are, the things you get to do, your personal freedom. And the people. Of course, you want safety for yourself, for your family. What you need to do is look around and find out, do you have that? Do you have that now, where it matters? And will you have that in the future for yourself and those who are important to you? In the worlds that are important to you, your business, your home, your work, the place where you put your heart and your efforts for your success. Gad, I could be a politician. Now, that's what, if you want to check it out, doesn't matter which convention you listen to on which playback, you can find that in order to appeal to all sorts of people, to draw you in, what they're going to do is kind of throw it all out there and see what sticks, all right? So I was saying, for you and your family and the people who are important to you, well, that goes self, other, and attention, direction. What's in it for you, Ron? Also, what's in it for, the people around you? The time frame. Start with the present, because you're like watching television or hearing the radio. Extend the time. Expand the scope. List the different kinds of content. Your work, your business, the safety of your home, the school, and you start naming different kinds of content. Speaking every one of them. Now, who isn't that going to appeal to? Well, someone who has a smaller scope. And they say, yeah, a lot of generalities. What are you going to do? Activities, right. Right, and then that's right. The other speeches you start to hear is, we're opening this many schools, and we're going to have internet in so many different places, and we budgeted this much money for this particular project, and it'll go into the future and so forth, as another way of answering other people. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Gary, that's one of the guys, yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. And if I were on the panel, I'd look at that commenter and say, what, you got a frog in your pocket? Well, he was saying we. He's saying the people don't want to know the big picture. Well, but who's saying this? Yeah, I'm just pointing that out. That we lose track of this sometimes. Yeah, go ahead.
No, but I'm sure he will give the whole picture, and then...
Well, okay. Anwar suggesting that one of the candidates will give a big picture and go into details. That would certainly be a strategy. You could use that approach. Another might be to use the bits and give examples and build that into a big picture. Now, and it's interesting to see when you begin to realize this stuff, it gets very interesting to be able to attend to the process on that level. It gives you a whole different insight that you can then apply to modeling. Right, you understand these are modeling tools that I'm showing you. That you can model in terms of sequences of states. You can model in terms of beliefs. You can model in terms of the enabling criteria and activating criteria. You can model in terms of representational systems. And you can model in terms of the metaprogram leanings that the person is using. Yeah, so my bringing up the idea of politicians was to show an application, but moreover to say you could also then watch the speeches. Of course, they're all vetted past at least, I'm sure, a few people, committees. And it's going to show, by the way, that it went by committees. And to me, that always means less specification. It doesn't have to, but it tends to. And you can also listen to the radio, read a newspaper, personal commentary. When I was modeling one of America's greatest futures traders, Richard Dennis, and Mr. Dennis is a very private man and self-educated, a self-made man. He started out, he was too young to trade commodities in Chicago. He had his father trading. He was calling out the trades from the side. And 20 years later, he retired with $250 million, having started with 1,600. I know, it's not much, but you can live on it. And being a private person, I had to figure out ways that I could get access to this stuff. Well, it turned out I realized that Richard Dennis wrote for a magazine. One page in the whole magazine, a privately circulated policy magazine, otherwise very boring. But I subscribed to that magazine for a year so I could take that back page, which I photocopied, and then I went through it with different colored pens, marking the different meta programs so that I could actually get it in color. Remember my example earlier with the sounds? Get it in color so that I could figure out what his leanings might be and the sequence of those. Yeah. It's a modeling tool. Later on, when I actually saw him in person, I paid the guy who sponsored me to do a demonstration project that you could model futures trading, is we went to where he was one of 3 presenters on a panel. And my colleague and I sat in the front row and looked up at him, and he began to speak, and I made a few notes, because now it's not written, because you know who edits stuff, even if it is written by the guy, because I knew he wrote his own stuff. But even then, so I'm listening, and about 5-10 minutes later, turn around, I've got it. Because you can do preparatory work when you can get a hold of, and Grinder and Bandler did this too. Bandler talks about with Erickson, they'd read some of the books, and Richard said he had a 5-minute segment of Erickson's trance stuff, which got Richard thinking that he should bring along sheet music. Well, sheet music, that you write music in, so that while he wrote down the inductions, he could actually take and mark changes in voice tone. Yeah. And along the same lines, the idea of being able to go through a transcript of what somebody does, mark that up in a way that you can almost read it like music. You can see the patterns of light repeating. And of course, you know the code. You've got different colors for different of the meta programs. Suss out these patterns. So by the time you're there in person, you've done so much preparation that getting the rest of the model goes quickly. You can also then counter-example the model, refine it.
We find out that it is a good marketing tool.
You think?
It is. We sold Alessandra something
Just like that. Okay. Now, there's more to it. Of course, we're going to get to motivation shortly. That's going to add to it. Submodalities, another way. Mix these together. Yes, it's highly influential on ourselves as well as others. Yeah. Now, a couple of things about applying these. I demonstrate with Ron a way of speaking about things. And in that way, you want to pay attention to how the person's language can affect which way they're going to go. In terms of utilization, and this will come up again as we go around on convincer strategies as well. It's one thing for me to say, Ron, there's something that you might be interested in, blah, 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 other people, and I start to lose him. But if I know that Ron is self-oriented, and also, as we'll find in convincer strategies, is self-reference, he is the authority, then I can say something along the line, Ron, only you can decide if this is valuable. And he goes, damn straight. Which is very different than someone who would be oriented to other, that is, they're stepping into other. This is often in psychology referred to as codependence. It is referred to as codependence. You know, it's what happens when a codependent is in a near-death experience? Someone else's life flashes before their eyes. How many codependents does it take to change a light bulb? Oh, no, let me do it. It's a nominalization, but it speaks to people who are very responsive to the needs of others. In fact, according to the literature, overly responsive. It's a way of describing people that spend more time over in other. Now, when Roger Bailey and Ross Stewart were utilizing this with Southwest Airlines, they created an interview instrument that made sure that the perceptual position and the attention direction that were occupied by the people that were hired to be the air stewards on the planes was going towards other, attention to other. And if you've ever ridden Southwest, they're so nice. So, how are you doing? Oh, you look a little cold. I'll get you a blanket. I mean, it's right out there over on you. Now, they even tell jokes when they're landing. One guy did this whole Arnold Schwarzenegger routine. And yet, you could see him in the back watching and listening for the response of the audience. Yes, he was pleasing himself, but what was more important is that, like a comedian, he got pleasure by pleasing others. Customer service is not all the characteristics. Again, there's a number of distinctions in the model, but a couple of them here. Also, what else would you want? Customer service, airline help, present time frame. You want them responsive now, not weeks from now. You want them mostly in the present. And again, you can see this on people, right? Is that they're the neuro part of the linguistic. The other thing about this is that when these people are like that, these are the people that those phrases that you go into the clothing store or you go into the appliance store and they say, everybody's buying this. You know, the hottest thing this season, we just can't keep these in the shop. Exactly. Because, Ron, only you can decide. Yes, that's the difference. It's a huge difference. I'm the same reaction. Richard Bandler's like, if everyone else is having it, I'm not. You know, it's like, okay, we're in our own category of self. So those ads that appeal to all those people, right? Now, I told you, I promised you I'd get a little bit about creating these experiences. If you fractionate, this is a hypnotic term from Erickson, if you create differences, if you fractionate a scope, so you go out on a date, right? And this could be someone with someone you're still involved with. You can create the sense that you spent more time with them, and they'll think that it was more quality and quantity. Instead of you go out to a place and you have dinner and you have dessert and all this sort of stuff, and then you go home, that's going to be one scope. Right. If you fractionate the scope so that you go for drinks one place, and then you go maybe for a walk or something, you know, and then you go to the restaurant, right? And then you leave the restaurant and you go somewhere else for coffee and dessert. And then you do a little something someplace else afterwards. They can experience those as separate scopes that have to be added together. And then it seemed like they were with you longer. By the way, this will have an effect on you as well. Just because you know how to do this doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. Of course it does. And it's like you did lots of things together instead of just one. Instead of going out for the evening, oh, it was great, we went here, we went that, we did this, we did that. And also, by the way, it means that if one of them bombs, since you separated them from each other, then the other says, well, part of it, but then there was this other thing we did. And they're separated by being different scopes. Now, that might motivate the person to want to be around you more often. It might. Thing is that decision and motivation are not separated. Remember, we go from one to the other, or the other to one, back and forth. So, if we were to consider motivation, because modern Western America tends to think in terms of make a decision, then get motivated. I'm going to decide I'm going to get fit, go get motivated. I'm going to decide I'm going to do something different in my life, they can get motivated. I need a coach to motivate me. I need a trainer, something or other like that. Doesn't have to be that way, but it often is. So to go to motivation, one of the very first and most important keys to motivation strategies, is, of course, the criteria of comparison. What criteria needs to be fulfilled? What values need to be fulfilled in order for the person to become motivated? Now, this can work both ways, yes? That it can be fulfillment of values that would motivate somebody. It can be violation of values. Somebody decides, I'm out of here. It might even be as simple as, oh, this is a smoking restaurant, I'm out of here.
So that would be move away, so to speak?
We'll be getting to that in a moment. My point is to emphasize right at the top that values, also known as criteria, now, if anybody's thinking this through, they're going to go, but wait, Charles, there's definitely criteria applied to making a decision. Absolutely. No question about it. So I'm saying I'm selecting on purpose. I'm restricting on purpose for the sake of learning. The thing is that the criteria in a decision strategy is going to depend on the content. At least we hope that the criteria changes for the type of content. When we're speaking in the motivation strategy of the fulfillment, the violation of any values or criteria, we're also immediately speaking in terms of the values and beliefs level of the logical levels. Now, what's curious about this is that when you ask a person about this, what's important to you about, that's a value question, right? That asks specifically what is it? It's asking values, criteria, and it's asking you, so self, that when you ask people about that, if they're in the helping professions, if they're in these kind of more abstract professions, then they might, if they've been to an NLP seminar, then they would be likely to answer in terms of value words such as trust, respect, satisfaction, relationship. They'd speak in terms of these kinds of words. And they can speak in terms of the other ones. This, again, is what you want to know. What's the person's natural leaning? So in a little bit, you're going to ask the person what's important about, and they may answer with criteria, value words, or they may say, it allows me to do so much, right? Or I can really apply my talents, or I get to be the person I really want to be. So that the answer can be in the same category, and the person may answer in another one just as likely, because of course they come to us having already practiced becoming familiar and making distinctions in a certain level of abstraction, which they then bring to us. Now, the short form for business is that businesses tend to be concerned with capabilities on down. Though in the last decade, and in no small part due to people like Robert Dilts and his work, they've started to talk about vision and mission, right? They've started to talk about values, right? Meanwhile, before the Erickson, Grinder, Bandler, Steve DeShazer, Weekland, MRI, School of Therapy, and so forth happened, therapists tended to be values up, values clarification, identity, Jungian types of things. And with the advent of more cognitive kinds of therapy, as I've just suggested, with the advent of getting results, they've moved down into capabilities and behavior. And that's an overgeneralization, but there is this kind of difference in which worlds they pay more attention to. So, So the first part of the motivation strategy is the elicitation of those values, that criteria that applies to what they want to be motivated about, or what they are motivated about, would like to learn more about how they do it, right? Maybe you're interested because you want to hire somebody. You want to find out how they motivate themselves. Maybe you want to find out how come in one situation you're motivated easily, in another situation it's like an old truck in the middle of the night in winter. You know, what's the difference? The number of differences are going to come out in the meta programs. The next thing, Ron, you pointed right to it, is the idea of what we've called the toward, away from, or the inhibition excitation. That is that the values that they have are operating on one side or the other more. Now that you'll be able to pretty soon hear that a number of criteria, you can actually hear which side they're on. So if I said, what's really important to me, I want to relax. That's a criteria, yes, or a criterion. And where does it go? Relaxation, away from, yeah. And if I say, you know, what I want to do now is I want to achieve something in my life. Excitation. Also, watch, nonverbals, right? So you can also pick it up from the neurology, the physiology. Now, if I say, I want more money. Okay, more, that's comparison, right? Money is the criterion. Where does it go? Are you sure? Right, so you know what happened? They go, it could be both, could be either, I don't know. That's exactly right. If you don't hear, if you have any question about, any lack of complete appreciation for which side it falls on, ask, what will having that do for you? Yes, what will having that do for you? We'll do a quick elicitation here. How many people here like money? How many people here need money? Is that everybody? Okay. Yes. So, what will having money do for you?
Having money will allow me to feel easier with myself.
Mm-hmm.
It will allow me to, well, it depends on how much money I have, but it would allow me to, when I see something that I like, and I think I might not be able to access that at some other place or time, it will allow me to go ahead and get it right away.
All right, now, so what did you just see? Because he did it both non-verbally. He went easier with myself, and then he went get it, right? So he went, right. We'll do another one. Rachel, whole pile of money, wheelbarrow full, big bills. What will having that do for you?
I could do all kinds of stuff with it.
Yeah.
I could, go places.
I don't know, could you? Okay. Now, not so strong, but still, I want you to listen here, because you might think by the softness of the voice, you might think by the relaxed demeanor, that it would be the relaxation response. But she says, get to go do things, even though she didn't gesture, even though she didn't get him to go, I'd get to go do things, you know, that still we've got what? What we call toward. Yeah, what we would call toward. Toward relaxation. Yes, I agree. That's why, Jim, earlier I talked about the confusion in the current format. Because people tend to think of it as being towards goals and desires, and they're excited to get them. And I think that's a prejudice for the fact that, or a bias, that came about because at the time this was being formulated was also the peak performance movement, and the two got associated. When in fact, I've indicated, I think there's more subtlety. I think that when people are meditating and they're endeavoring to increase their relaxation response, increase their serotonin, that they are seeking that. But not many people I know would take our point of view and say, oh yeah, when somebody goes away to a weekend retreat to meditate, they're really moving toward. No, most people wouldn't associate it that way. They'd say, oh, they're avoiding the world. So there's a little trickiness in there that I happen to agree with you. Now, since you're speaking, money. You like it. Money likes you. Well, you didn't know that. It likes you. It's told me so. And it wonders, if you had a whole lot of it, what would having that do for you?
Probably allow me more freedom of choice in terms of things I would spend time doing.
Okay. Well, hold right there. Freedom of choice is, okay, so freedom's the key criterion there. Toward or away from? Don't know. Right, you don't know, and I'll tell you why. Because is freedom taking away from the stress and all, because some people, they want to be free of all kinds of obligations and stresses and societal demands, and some people want to be free to experience all these other wonderful experiences. And from what Jim was showing me, I don't know. So I take that criterion, same question. So freedom, what will having that do for you?
That should be free for.
Free for?
Probably to do some other things professionally and to do other things with my friends.
Okay. So then he indicates, yeah, it's toward these other possibilities. So you see how easy that is. But the significance is to not let your own formulations get in the way of finding out theirs. So anytime you have a question, and I do mean that, and you watch me do it here, just ask the next one, what will having that do for you? What will having that do for you? And sometimes the person kind of looks at you, and they're going, God, I can't believe he's asking this again. And I said, yeah, I know I'm a little slow here. And I'm just quite willing to play the role of, well, you know, I have to ask the question. The guy who runs the company says I have to get the answer. Of course, I'm running the company. I don't tell him that. So just keep going with it until you get. Now, there are other words that you know. Attain. Right. Gain. Achieve. Okay. Relax. Relief. Release. Take a little more time, Jim. It's like, relax. Relief. Release. Run.
First heard about away towards, a lot of what they were talking about is what you didn't want. You know what I mean? I don't want to feel X, I don't want to feel Y. That more or less meant that you were moving away from something. And what you did want was something that you were moving towards. That's how it was explained to me anyway.
Yes, and I want to emphasize that. I'll go into more of this perhaps later. If you think about the survival of our species, which is most important to deal with first? Getting away from the bear or going toward the berries, right? As a set of skills that would keep a species alive, having a well-developed away from is very important, right? So there's no surprise that people have developed that. Now, on the other hand, even little kids, once they can crawl, even before that, they have desires. You know, I'm warm, I'm fed, I'm dry. Ooh, what's over there? You know, so we have both of these at a biological level. One of the ones I always have fun with is if you go to a movie and people are buying popcorn, right? And they're in the popcorn and they have the popcorn butter, oh, really fattening, great. And then they're in the movie and time has passed. And there's people popcorn, then they start, trying to get the piece of popcorn out between the teeth. That's an example of away from. It's biological. We all use it in different ways. Just like whether or not you act on it, if you see something you want, you go, oh my. Whatever that is, that's toward. Acting on it is a different meta program, which we'll be getting to in just a moment. Again, each one is different than the other and they interact. So if you feel desire, a want, you don't even act on it, that's still an expression of toward. The significant part of this combining with criteria is with humans, I'm going to draw a line. It's an artificial line, and yet it's there in all of us, somewhat more fuzzy, somewhat more sharply. And this is a line between the physical expression of these patterns and the fact that we respond to nominalizations, ideas, concepts. People who are so away from failure that they drive themselves to succeed. And I know a very famous trader made millions and millions of dollars and does so out of a fear of being poor. He grew up poor. This guy has not had less than $10 million in maybe 2-3 decades, and yet can still drive himself with the idea of that. In other words, he's measuring it in an abstract way. It's no longer about the actual monies that he has. And we know people kill themselves over an idea. Yeah, they think that I can't face life anymore. And admittedly, life might have fewer choices to them, but every day they still feed themselves. They could still go off and do something. They could pack it all up and take a steamer to the islands and start over. But do they do that? No, they're responding to the nominalization. They're responding to the concept. Just like people, when they go for success, they're actually going for the nominalization and all the experiences it brings them, yes, but they're going for the nominalization. And someone else might be very good at expressing toward, like chocolate, and hasn't learned how to express that pattern in a more abstract way. This goes to what I said earlier about people coming to a seminar and getting you the money and arriving on time because they want to learn how to set goals. It's sort of almost they're telling you, I want to learn to set abstract goals. I want to learn how to apply these principles to larger and more far-reaching desires in my life. And that I don't know how to do. I know how to do it on the near term. And I know how to do it in the more everyday. We are curious creatures in our capabilities. I want to pause on this, take any questions. We'll revisit this. Now, what happens next? We've got the toward and away from. Or as I prefer to say, the away from and toward, but well, there's actually acting on it. Now, what this speaks about, and the terms are not that useful. You run into a problem here. There might have been better terms, but we call the terms of art, the words they've assigned to these. We're not in any position to reassign them. But how many of you are attracted, you don't act on it? All right? There's a way to understand this that is sort of colloquially expressed as the difference between academia and business. What do we say about academia? They talk about it a lot. They never do anything. What do we say about business? They do stuff. Rather than being ready, aim, shoot, it's shoot, aim, ready. They do it. And what we've noticed in NLP is the relationship of that between the subject of the sentence and the verb. If I say, let's go, we would call that proactive. That's what we call proactive. Let's go. On the other hand, if I said, I'm wondering about the possibility that we might take the time to consider how and when we might go, I exaggerate for effect. The idea is that the distance, the number of words between the subject and the verb go, is a way of figuring out how reactive, again, I would not have used this word, but how reactive the person is. That is, what is the delay to action? If the distance between the subject and the verb is 0 or just a little, a modifier, then they're going to be fairly quick to action. Some people are so quick to action that they don't even bother with the subject. It's go, go, right? Very proactive as you can get. Just do it. Yeah, exactly. Just do it. What do you mean just do it? Do it. Even more proactive. Over here, the delay that let's consider when it might be best, and I mean really best, to do it. There's going to be a delay. This was great fun for me when I was doing this consult with this company, because we were doing an interview with people, and the people running the company were trying to utilize the NLP to sign people up to work with the firm and to become clients of the firm. And I would do an interview with someone. It was always like, get them to sign while they're there, was the idea. This was the owner of the company who was saying. Meanwhile, I'd go into the interview and I'd listen to the distance between the subject and the verb. And I could turn to the person with a straight face and say, I understand that you're going to need time to take action on this. So I want you to go home tonight and take all the time you need and call us tomorrow and tell us what we're going to do next. And they would say, okay. Well, first of all, it was a pace. If I had tried to force them, this would be just like trying to say other people will matter to somebody who it's for them, or vice versa. So it was a pace to say it in that way to them. And there was also some hypnotic stuff in, Erickson stuff in there. Take all the time you need tonight. And call us up tomorrow and let us know how we're going to proceed. How we're going to proceed presupposes they said yes. So yeah, I was loading the deck a little bit. But the point I want to make here is that you do pile these things up. If you do just one at a time, you're going to get less effect. And the other was with how it's a pace. This is called level. Which means the degree of proactive, reactive, measured by that bit of grammar called how many modifiers between the subject and the verb. I pause for those people that need time. Now, once again, we're dealing with the language of this particular group of things. This next part was called decision factors. And you go, whoa, wait a minute, it belongs under decisions. And in a way, of course, it's present in a decision. And yet, as I found, it has more to do with motivation. And I'll be explaining why in just a moment. This is the match-mismatch. This is the one about sameness, comparison, and difference. Remember what I said about the nature of a decision, that a decision is something where you generate a number of specific options and then you choose between them. So it's generating specific options, digital, and then it's cutting them back digitally. The kind of information processing has a lot of digital qualities to it. Whereas motivation, by my various analogies to getting an engine to turn over and exercise and thresholds, has a lot of analog information in it. People can speak about how much of their criteria is fulfilled. And as we know, we don't always get exactly what we want in life, and so we have to get as much as we can, or get as many of the criteria is fulfilled. So there's more of an analog quality than a complete yes or no. And the towards and away from, very much about analog in terms of what is the feeling that's rising that finally gets you to move, or what is the feeling that you're moving and getting more and more of as you get closer. Again, analog information. Decision factors, while there's a certain digitalness to them, there's also a certain analog quality in that everything has a certain amount of sameness, like having the two chairs out here looking the same, but then the difference. And so there's the degree of difference. If I'd scattered the chairs in all directions, then it would have been all difference. And that appeals to certain people. And if I had put the chairs all in a row, there would have been no difference. And that is an appeal for certain people. So there's a degree between sameness and difference that people find appealing. Ron, looks like you have a question.
I was thinking, as soon as you said you want to if you take a bunch of chairs and basically create what is difference, in essence, what you're doing in your head as well, like let's say that satisfies you. What you're doing in your head is you're trying to make a comparison or a match to a mismatch thing.
Okay, so you're still back to the match or the mismatch thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would that be a criteria level at that point in time?
You can think of it that way, Ron, and you actually are on track about how these are multiple leveled. And for the simplicity of learning, you can just notice the languaging the person uses and how many of the new devices and gadgets they have. Are they the early adopter, to use the language of Jeffrey Moore? Are they the people that want the new gadget? Are they the people that have got the new stuff in the stain-resistant pants or whatever it is? Or are they people that go, I'm not going to upgrade to that new operating system until it's been out for a year or so. They do want that new operating system, but they want it to be proven. So they're doing more of a comparison. They're waiting until that new and improved has actually been proven. It's like never buy a new line of a car when it comes out. Wait a year or so, after they know how to build that kind of vehicle and they've settled out the problems kind of thing. And then there's the people that are going to go for, I want steady, my dad drove a Ford, my grandfather drove a Ford, and I drive a Ford, and I drive one of those Fords that, I drive Ford trucks. These SUVs, these yuppie mobiles, I have nothing to do with them. Or something like that. You find that all over. You find that all over.
We're a redneck province. Pickup trucks are everywhere.
Right, and again, you take a pattern, and then we can characterize people with it. We can do attribution. But what I'm hoping you're beginning to realize, it's just a pattern. Let me give you an example here that might kind of set this straight. There's something that we have in this all around us that we need. Energy. But not in a non-specific way. Electricity. Electricity. Now, do you want people making that electricity to make that same good 110, 50 amp electricity day in and day out? Or do you want them to go, we really need a new electricity? You want to get some people in those plants and in that business who want to turn out that same old good electricity. Yes, that finding people who get great satisfaction from keeping things the way they are very useful members of society, just like the innovators and the people who want stuff that new can be very useful contributors to society. We really do need all of us. And the thing is, though, that you go, people, this guy hasn't had a new idea in years. What does he do? He does maintenance down at the plant. Good. We want people that really get satisfaction from getting the status quo. See, here's the deal. We all understand that when people are moving toward, they're getting a certain feeling of satisfaction. We've even named it. Dopamine, norepinephrine is the chemicals that are bathing their brains. And they go, ah. And the closer they get, the better it looks. Just like we know that as people get relief from stress, from feeling enclosed, when they get more choices, that there's more and more of a sense their serotonin levels rise and they get deeper senses of relaxation. There's a physical, while that serotonin bathes their brain. Here's the thing to try on. People who respond to people are getting that same kind of chemical stimulation as the other people who love to go and do sports are getting the same kind of chemical stimulations that people who love to collect cars or antiques are getting the same kind of stimulation as the people who love to go out and sit in the forest. That for each of these, it's not merely familiarity like a habit. It's also a sense in which they get those feelings that they like doing that. And so you take somebody who's really activity and place-oriented, like a number of people out here in Colorado are, who like to walk around in the woods and take it all in, and you take them to one of the malls, and they go, yeah, they just got the face over here. What am I going to do here? There's nothing I want to look at, you know. They don't have that connection.
And that would be part of their criteria too, wouldn't it?
Sure, it's going to show up right, that their criterion values, of course, are going to be influenced by which content they're applying them to. So yes, these all do interrelate. We just are isolating them for the purposes of facilitating learning. And because we know that if you want to motivate somebody, speaking in terms of their criteria is going to have even more impact than speaking in terms of the content, though it certainly will have an effect. And we know that speaking in terms of what motivates them away from or toward will certainly have more impact than merely mentioning the time frame. And we know that as the way they go to action, we can be respectful of that and pace that. That if we want, well, let's go, you like it? You want it, you like it, we go. And they go, I always find if I take a few minutes, I become more motivated to go. And you go, take all the minutes you need in your mind right now. Because, of course, we know how to do things with time. For ourselves as well as others. Yeah. That's, as I say, the next point in this, of course, is to take questions for the purposes of doing an exercise. I feel overwhelmed by your questions.
We didn't go into reason yet. Is there some reason for that?
Oh, yes. There is a reason. I deleted it.
Okay.
But I can bring it back now that you brought it up.
Well, is it necessary?
It is motivating. It's more good. Thank you very much, and let me grab a different color. Reason. Again, terrible use of terms. But the people that came before me, it's like chipmunk. It doesn't look like a chip. It doesn't look like a monk. Why is it a chipmunk? Yeah, but we've all agreed on it, right? So reason is really about either entrainment or activating criteria. The two categories that you get are procedures, or shall we say procedural, but it's called procedures, or options. And I'm going to use a different color because options are related to criteria. So you ask the person the question you never ask in NLP at the practitioner level, but you ask at the master level, which is why. So you've got some context, either of the decision or particularly of motivation, a motivational context. And you ask them the values in that motivational context. Then you listen for towards and away from values, criteria. The words that you don't know, you ask, what will having that do for you, for each one of them separately until you get the direction. During that time you've been listening, do they speak in short, choppy sentences where it's subject, verb, subject, modifier, verb? Or do they speak subject, modifier, 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 verb, modifier, modifier, verb, subject, modifier, 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 verb? You're listening. You go, okay, they are on some continuum between very proactive, very reactive. You've been noticing, do they talk about more, less, less, improvement, or they talk about new, or they say, what I really like about this is the same. It's got this sameness as before. Oh, no, wait, it's unique. So then you ask them, why is this important? Why? Or how do you go about motivating yourself? Why is this important? And what you'll get is, if you ask, why do this? Why exercise? The why question should get you criteria. But what it will get you instead from someone who is procedural is it'll get you a behavioral sequence. So they'll say, well, the first thing I do is, and then the second thing I do is, and the third thing I do, and the fourth and the fifth. Whereas the other person will actually answer the why and will say, well, I could do this, and 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 I could do this. They'll offer options. Let me take a look at this. What are you looking at?
We're asking why, and they're answering procedure.
That's right.
When people asking why, don't usually respond.
Yeah, I'm not connecting there either.
That's because you would respond with options.
I would respond to the criteria.
That's right. That's what I was saying. That's why I put it in blue.
What is options in there?
Different possible choices, which is criteria. I'm looking in the room. I'm trying to find somebody procedural. I think I found him. No. Okay. We don't have one in the room. Yeah? Sometimes.
Charles, the way I read this is that instead of reason, that question might be, or that word might be, how do you go about this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But sometimes the going about it in a particular sequence is the very reason for doing it.
Sometimes the going about it is the very reason for doing it.
I'm getting pleasure out of it.
Oh, yeah, okay, right.
This process that I'm in, this is, just get a person who really likes to organize things. And they start by taking everything and putting it in little files, and then they're getting great joy out of that.
This goes to what I was saying before about the people with the content that they respond to, they get pleasure from. Just like the people who like to follow a procedure get pleasure from doing the steps of their procedure. Whereas people who do not like to follow a procedure, who actually reads the manual before they use the software? That's what I thought.
I'll read at least parts of it.
Yeah, I know, parts.
Now, I'm a procedures type person,
I bet you are part of the time.
practically all the time. I like to break things down in a step-by-step fashion.
Okay.
And answering why, I wouldn't come up with a step-by-step fashion.
Okay.
Actually, when we were eliciting your, when we were doing that, what was that, the compulsion blowout, I remember you seeing a whole bunch of things at once. Do you remember?
Right, but then we put them all out in a row.
Yeah, but first it was like, oof, 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 oof.
That's
They
for
were all-
starters.
Yeah, right. He does both. He does both. What I'd like to do is, given the time, is to invite you this evening, in whatever way it makes sense to you, to begin to utilize these patterns so far. All of them in the decision strategies and all the way down the motivation strategy to the place of your comfort. This may mean watching maybe a little convention, a little news. It might mean reading a magazine or an article. I have some ways that I want to support that learning. One of the ways I want to support that is I'm passing out here a bit of a chapter in a rather remarkable book called The Power of Maps. And in this book, the author, Dennis, says the following. This is essentially what maps give us: reality. A reality that exceeds our vision, our reach, the span of our days, a reality we achieve no other way. We are always mapping the invisible and the unattainable, or the erasable, the future or the past, or the whatever is not present here now. And it is through the gift the map gives us, transmuting it into everything it is not: reality. And he goes on in these pages to describe a picture of the Earth from space and says, we've never seen that. And he goes on to describe how each of us maps a journey